Welcome to this special bonus episode of Agricola Card of the Week, where we're looking at the France deck. So while Season 2 of Agricola Card of the Week was airing, the France deck was released. I had a little bit of a time to play around with it, and I've got 5 minor improvements and 5 occupations to share with you today. I've chosen these to give you a flavour of the deck. Season 4, so not the next season but the one after, will feature the France deck, and I'll be going through some of the more in-depth cards in that sort of one at a time. But just to give you a flavour, basically I highly recommend the deck. I don't think there's a bad card in it. It fills in a few gaps. It provides a slightly different perspective on some things that have been done before, but I think it's quite a nicely balanced deck with quite a lot of flavour to it as well. The trip to the lake. Whenever you use a fishing action space, you get an additional food and a wood. It costs you 2 read, and you have to have 2 occupations out. Nice basic little card, fills a little gap that we didn't know was there, and another interesting use of the fishing action space, never a bad thing. The 5 rings. It costs you either a wood or a stone, which you then put on that card to remind you, and then basically you then get either a 1 wood or a 1 stone discount on any improvements you play. It's only improvements. It's whatever you paid for that card is whatever discount you then get. But a nice simple card, no other prerequisites on it. It's called the 5 rings, obviously a reference to the Olympics. The gentleman on the card, Pierre de Coubertin, was the founder of the modern Olympics. They're very protective of their copyright, so it's not called the Olympics card, it's called the 5 rings. But anyway, I like the idea of resource discounts. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Splendor, and a nice little addition to the game. The Park Cemetery. It doesn't cost you anything. When you play it, you take 3 stone from the general supply, put it on the plough 1 field action space. Any player that then uses that space can take 1 of those stone. When there's no stone left, you can discard this card and plough field yourself. Discarding a card might impact on other cards where you have to have a certain number of improvements out, or other things that give you bonuses for having certain improvements out. So whether or not you end up discarding it to plough a space will really depend on your circumstances. I included this card in this video because this is there's about half a dozen cards in the France deck that involve putting things out, usually food, but some other things out on spaces, to sort of encourage people or give people a bonus for using those spaces. This is not something we've seen an awful lot. There's the wood distributor from the basic game, but it seems to be something that they're experimenting a bit with in the France deck. I don't like the idea of giving someone else an opportunity to get some stone, although maybe you might want to give someone an incentive to use a space that they wouldn't otherwise use, or you might just be hoping that you can get that stone. Being able to have an extra plough action at the end, assuming that all the stone gets used up, is not necessarily a bad thing. An interesting card, and certainly provides a different aspect on the game. The watering can costs you a food, and it's a travelling around card. Basically, you put an extra grain on your grain fields, an extra vegetable on your vegetable fields. Nice, simple. Basically, you're using the watering can to water. Not too much complicated about that. It's because it's a travelling card, you could be giving someone else a benefit, although depending on when you play it and what your strategy is, you could maybe pick a time to play that's not going to benefit other people so much, but a nice simple card. And finally, the Encircling Wall. It costs you 4 stone, and basically you are fencing 1 single square pasture. It gives you 2 points. Quite an expensive way to fence a pasture, 4 stone. On the other, you don't pay the wood, it's just the 4 stone. On the other hand, sometimes you've got some stone lying around because you're planning on doing a renovate, or you're planning on building a major improvement. Someone else got to them first. So I like to have that card up my sleeve if it comes out. Sometimes you're struggling a little bit for pasture at some point in the game. Given that it's worth 2 points in and of itself, and also a pasture could be worth a point, usually worth a point. Having 1 less empty space would be a point. Having a fenced stable, if you happen to have a stable, could be worth 4 or 5 points difference just playing that card. So a nice one to have. Fills out a nice little gap in the game, and just an interesting little card. I do like it. Proudly sponsored by Yeoman. Available in the App Store now. The landscape gardener. When you sow, you can basically sow on that card as if it was 2 fields. Also, when you play the card, you get to do a sow action. So I've used this before the first harvest to get a couple of crops on the go. You don't have to have ploughed a field, and when you play that card, provided you've got those resources before you play the card, you can go boom boom, play that card and sow those 2 things straight on that card. So a really nice way of getting some crops on the go early. There are a lot of minor improvements that act as extra fields, things like the acreage or the bean field, that kind of thing. I don't think this has ever been done with an occupation, and this is kind of typical of the France deck again. There are things in occupations that previously have been done with minor improvements. So anyway, nice, interesting, simple little card. The grain speculator is another one that's been done with minor improvements before. You're adding 1, 3 and 5 to the current round and putting a grain on those spaces, and when you get to that round you receive the grain. Quick, simple, easy way to get some grain. It's been done with minor improvements, nothing unusual, but a nice card anyway. The oceanographer is another version of the put a little pile of resources on the card, like the grocer, the food connoisseur, that kind of thing. The 5th one in this is a vegetable, so assuming you can get those resources off quickly, you could get a vegetable before the 2nd harvest. You basically, every time you plough exactly 1 field, you're taking 1 resource off, so that's where it's unique. You have to plough exactly 1 field, so if you've got anything that gives you some ability to plough more than 1 field, or anything that's going to cause you to plough more than 1 field at one time, that doesn't count, so that might dictate what other improvements or occupations you play. But nonetheless, another interesting way of getting vegetables early, and another variation on the get more resources by doing things in the game and taking things off a pile. I do like those cards. The wood gatherers. Each round where you spend at least 4 wood on improvements, rooms, stables or fences, you get an additional 2 wood back at the end of the round. So can't be used for things like heating your house with Farmers of the Moor, or spending a wood with the ice skate sharpener from the Netherlands deck, or turning wood into food with the joinery, that kind of thing. But basically anything, pretty much anything where you're building out with wood, provided you spend at least 4 wood in that round, you get 2 back. I have played this card. I've played most of these cards actually that we're talking about today, or I've had them played against me. I do like the cards that kind of give you this thing where if I do a build, I'm getting a discount, which essentially brings more wood into the game for everyone. So things like the hedgekeeper, the stable hand, basically you're doing a build and you're getting a discount on wood, but it's equivalent to as if you had spent another turn getting extra wood. So I do like the fact that there's another fresh take on that idea. And again, I've played this card to good effect, and I do really like it. And finally, for the occupations, the immigrant's son. When you play your 5th, 6th and 7th occupation, you can also plough 1 field. I have used this card to good effect. Sometimes as you're getting towards the end of the game and you're trying to fill out your empty space, being able to have another way of playing a field, especially if there's other competition for the plough 1 field space, is not a bad thing. To get the maximum benefit, you would have to play it no later than your 4th occupation, at which point it doesn't give you a benefit. So basically you're playing this as your 4th occupation, planning to play a 5th, 6th and 7th occupation and plough some fields. So it does take a little bit of planning around that. If you play it later than your 4th occupation, you're getting less opportunities to take the plough action, because they have to be an occupation you play after this. Playing this card by itself doesn't do anything. It's only those additional occupations that you play afterwards that give you a benefit. Nonetheless, another way of getting to do extra actions in the game. I do like it. So thank you for watching this special episode on the France deck. I hope that's given you a flavour for the deck. I highly recommend it, given that it's widely available now. Pick up a copy, that's a no-brainer. I will be doing a special entire season on the France deck that's coming up in Season 4. The next season, Season 3, will be all about 3+ occupations from the E-deck. Keep an eye out for both of those. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. This is by far my favourite because I think it adds a lot of variety to the base game, so it combines really well with the basic cards. If you're going to buy a 1-card expansion, this would be it. It's all about points. You get between 1 and 9 points for having between 5 and 9 improvements out. Proudly sponsored by Yeoman. Available in the App Store now.